It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to Jill on Money. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. I am Jill Schlesinger. Mark is running the show, as always. A fine individual, a fine lad. He's giving me his British The Crown swing. I think you have to swing. You're only doing your hand. I think you have to move your arm also across, right? And then it's like sort of that, okay? This is very bad. This is, okay, theater of the mind. So I'm sort of waving in that British monarch type of way. Mark and I are obsessed with the crown. And we are both Anglophiles. We love the monarchy. Okay. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be a great one. We've got tons of questions here. And if you would like to get on the program, the easiest way to do so is shoot us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Tell us what your question is. Mark will get you lined up to be a guest. That's what we did with our first caller of the program. It's Pat from Des Moines. Hello, Pat, and welcome to the program. What can we do for you?
I'm a retired couple. My husband and I are 70 and 71. We're wondering what we can do to lower our taxes and if we should be paying off our mortgage or an RV loan.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what you have in terms of income right now.
Well, we have a combined monthly income take-home of $10,000 a month from pensions and Social Security.
Wow, that's great.
Disability. We're very grateful. And we have savings of about $714,000 as of today.
Mm-hmm. And is that savings, when you mean savings, you mean in a savings account, or do you mean in retirement plans? In what?
These are retirement plans. We have $150,000 in two Roth IRAs, and the rest, about $555,000 in pre-tax dollars, IRAs, that kind of thing.
So you right now are being forced to take, I shouldn't say that. You must take your required distributions right now, and obviously that adds to the tax burden. When you said $10,000 a month, did that include those required distributions or not?
No, that doesn't include the required distribution.
Okay. So, So right now, according to the new income tax brackets for 2018, you will be in the 22% marginal bracket. That bracket goes from about $77,400 to $165,000. So that's where you are, 22%.
Yeah.
There's not a ton that you can do because you have to take your distributions and you can't stop the income from coming in. Theoretically, what you could do is you could start converting some of your retirement plan assets to Roth assets, but I would only do that if you really feared that your tax bracket would go up in the future. And the way that you might do that is think about it and say, well, I would take some of the money that's in my pre-tax account, and every year I'd convert a little bit, but make sure we stay under $165,000 because that's the bracket you're in, and I wouldn't want to go up a bracket. And then you would not be forced to take the distribution later when potentially taxes could rise. Besides that, there's no real benefit for you to paying off a mortgage or your RV loan in terms of your tax situation. But what are the interest rates on those two loans?
Well, the rate on the mortgage is 3%. It's a 15-year mortgage that is would be paid off in about 9 years. We do make like one extra payment a year, and I think it might pay off a year early, but the rate is 3%.
Yeah, just not, it's not a huge rate, and I presume that the money you have in your Roth and your and even in your pre-tax account, that those accounts are earning more than the 3 or or more with what's the RV loan?
The RV loan is at a higher rate. It's 3.75%.
Oh, but that's still pretty low, right?
Yeah. Now, we want a new car. Our current only vehicle other than the RV is a 10-year-old Subaru, but we don't want another payment. And so we're thinking, should we pay off the RV loan and then get a newer car?
Well,
but then that balance is $39,000.
So what about money? Would you be taking money out of your Roth to pay that, or do you have other money that's available?
Well, we could take it out of the pre-tax. Part of us wants to keep the Roth money for our children.
Yeah, that's the best asset to pass along. I mean, you want to keep the RV, but I don't.
Yeah.
So what would a new loan be? What would the rate be?
Lower. We're looking at car loans, maybe about a point lower.
Wow. I mean, you could, if you pay off the RV loan with, again, you pull the money out but you must stay within this tax bracket. That's really the key here, right? That you don't want to go over 165. Otherwise, whatever you pull out above 165 will get taxed at 24%. I guess that I would say this. I don't see the need to pay this down so quickly, except for the fact that you just don't like it. And are you a net savers every year on that 10 grand a month?
No, we did a kitchen remodel this last year. And we traveled. So we haven't really been saving any of that now.
But
we
I mean,
feel like
But that kitchen remodel is like a one-time event. The car is a one-time event. Presumably, when those two big things come out, you'll start be able to use your cash flow. I mean, I don't think that I would take extra money out. I think what I would do is that once you do the car, and once you're kind of have these big, huge expenses out of your cash flow, then I would just use some of the income and pay down the highest interest note first, and so that would be the 375 for the RV loan. And once that's paid off, that's paid off. I mean, you don't have to worry about it. If you'd like to accelerate the mortgage, that's fine. I wouldn't go crazy taking money out of your retirement account to do that, because then you have to pay tax again. And so, I mean, I think that you're sort of on the right track. And as you say, you're lucky to have a problem like, oh, we make too much money, but it's a good problem to have. And it sounds like you don't really need to dip into your retirement assets for any reason except if something large like that one-time expense comes up. So I think that it sounds like you're in good shape.
Okay.
All right. So make sure you got those wills up to date. Make sure you talk to your kids about money and go forth and prosper. How's that?
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Take care. Thanks for calling. Okay, we'll get back to your questions when we return. It's Jill on Money. Hey, check out our new website. It's up, running, alive and well. We also have a way for you to have more of us. It's the Jill on Money newsletter. Check it out at jillonmoney.com. It's Mark's latest creation. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. And yes, I am Jill Schlesinger. And Mark is the producer, the executive producer. He's waving in that very British way. He's trying to do the Queen's wave. Not well, I might add. You're going to have to work on that. Did you finish The Crown finally? And did you like it? Oh my gosh. But did you like it? Yes, he liked it. Did you like it better than the first season? He likes the first season better. I loved The Crown. I can't get into Victoria. I've been trying to do that. I'm not quite as into that. Anyway, this is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. 888-411-JILL. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. Right now, we are going to Laura. She is from the great state of Connecticut. Welcome to the program, Laura. What can I do for you?
Well, thank you. I am a huge fan of yours, so I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you.
My question was prompted by starting to do my taxes this year and every other year before. And really it revolves around the amount of capital gains distributions that I'm receiving from mutual funds. And it's an issue that bothers me every year because I don't withhold against it. I don't know if there is a way to do so, but it causes me to have an uncertain amount of income every year. It seems like it's increasing every year, which I guess is a good thing. And I know that the general, advice is to, participate in mutual funds, which I do. But the reason why I don't like them is because of these sort of uncontrollable amounts of declarations of capital gains every year.
Right.
Whereas if I purchase an individual stock, I'm very much more in control of when I take a capital gain.
Yeah.
But I wonder what insight you might have regarding the mutual fund capital gains issue.
I think I think it stinks, and I agree with you. It is one of the big reasons in the 90s that I think that a lot of people started saying, wait a second, maybe I should be looking at index funds because there's no buying and selling of the asset that's within that fund, right? I mean, because here's the problem. You're going to get dividends. That's easy, right? There's sort of an easy amount of money that you can kind of quickly calculate. But as you said, you cannot control whether the manager of your fund has purchased that stock 12 years ago before you ever owned the fund and then starts selling it off into a bull market and you're getting a share of that capital gains. What you could do is you could move to index funds where you don't have the only reason there would be a sale is if a stock goes in or out of the index, right? So that's one way to limit it. But here's the problem. My guess is you've owned these funds for a long time.
I have.
So now you have embedded gains in these funds, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What would you guess is, well, first of all, so this is in a taxable account. How much is the account worth right now?
Probably around $400,000.
Okay. And what do you think the cost basis is in the fund, in these?
I've had them since like 1987.
Oh, so. You're screwed.
Yeah, I'm screwed.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk about other things that you could do. So, first of all, what you could potentially do is, there's probably not one loser in that account, right? There's nothing that's a capital loss, is there?
There's one that's probably very small. It's an international fund, but it's only like $25,000, so it's not much.
All right. I mean, you could get out of it and say, let me get out of this and sell something that's at a gain and be neutral, right?
Gotcha. Right.
That's about all you can do with that. Tell me about the rest of your financial life. How old are you?
I'm 55.
And this is your non-retirement account. Do you have a retirement account as well?
Yes, from a previous employer.
And what's in there?
Probably about 1.3 divided, probably like 80% cash, to be honest.
What?
I know it's naughty, but it's because of just fear of the market, I guess.
I guess if you put it all together, that you say you got 400 that's invested, all right, okay, I'm going to just calm down about that.
I also have CDs outside, that are a lot in cash as well.
Okay, you're a safe gal. I get it. How much in CDs?
Probably about 800.
Single or married?
Single.
Dude, with this kind of net worth, if you want to be married, you certainly could be. But that's besides the point.
I have a significant one.
All right, that's fine. And you still working?
I am for a new employer where my salary has been cut in about half.
Okay, how much are you making now?
Probably around 60.
Cover your needs though? You're 60?
Yeah, because I also have a pension from that prior employer that supplements a little bit.
How much is the pension?
Probably about 35.
All right. Well, you're in good shape. I mean, here's the deal. You could, if you'd like, when you're doing your taxes this year. Oh, wait a second. Let me just ask you one other question. Are you going to get hammered because of the new tax law because you're a Connecticut person?
Yes.
You're going to be in bad shape, right?
Yes. I just sort of did a pro forma based on what I think is going to happen next year. And, yeah, it's going to cost me money. I could tell already.
So here's what I think you might want to do. one way that you can avoid some nasty surprises is you can make quarterly estimates. Do you make quarterly estimates right now for when you're doing your taxes?
I do not.
You might want to do that.
Yeah.
And the way that it works is that if you make less than 150, which I don't know when you switch to this job, but now you do. If you just pay 100%, so you'll do your taxes for 2017, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll get whatever your tax bill is, and say, you paid $25,000 in taxes, right? I'm just guessing. If you just pay, you say, okay, here's what my withholding is. And then what you can do is you can say, I'm going to make quarterly estimates, and you just estimate your tax will be pretty much either exactly the same or maybe even a little bit more. But let's just say it's exactly 100% of what you paid this 2017 tax year for 2018. You make these estimates so you don't get some really horrible surprise. And you may even over withhold. I just interviewed Ed Slott, who's like this really interesting CPA. He's also like an IRA expert. He basically said that this should be the tax year where you shouldn't worry about over withholding or getting a big refund when you didn't expect it, because he said this is the transition year. And if you just don't want to have a nasty surprise, you can make quarterly estimates. And the way you avoid any penalty on your taxes is simply to just say, I'm going to pay 100% of what I owed last year in quarterly estimates. If you want to go a little bit beyond that, you could certainly do that. I don't know. It's not like hugely in your favor to do that because you have so much cash. You can always pay a tax bill. So, I mean, if you want and you just want to have a little more consistency, you can do quarterly estimates. Do you work with a CPA? You do this yourself, it sounds like, right?
I do it myself, yes.
So I think that, in your case, I wouldn't go crazy, and I wouldn't even worry that much about capital gains distributions, because at this point, you're not going to do that much with it. I don't want you to go sell it. Are you charitably inclined?
Yes, and I think that's getting limited next year as well.
No, it's not. Charitable is not. So what you should be doing is, if you're charitably inclined, gift some of those highly appreciated mutual fund shares to your charities of choice.
Oh, okay.
That's what you should do.
Okay.
And, you could probably buy your way onto any board you want.
So is there a limit? There's no.
No.
Oh, okay, okay.
Go crazy. Go give $50,000 away. You could make that, we'll make that account go away in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Use that for your charitable giving. For sure.
Okay, that's helpful.
No, and then you remember, you don't have to pay anything, right? Because if you gift the shares, you don't have to pay the tax that is due on the whatever you gift. So that's a great way to do it. All right, Laura from Connecticut, an amazing saver, a little wimpy on the retirement allocation. You're doing great. I wish you the best of luck, and start gifting those highly appreciated shares as soon as you can, because that way you don't have to worry about capital gains distributions. Thanks for calling. Hey, for everyone else, if you are worried about those capital gains distributions, why shouldn't you be? Because they are so annoying. Just remember that there are very few ways to kind of get around these issues. One of the best ones is to gift highly appreciated shares. It's an easy thing to do, and I encourage you to do so. So, Laura, thanks for calling. Great call. You are listening to Jill on Money, 855-411-JILL. Email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to JillOnMoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back with Jill on Money. And this is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life, but only if you give us a holler. Couple ways to get in touch with us. 855-411-JILL. That is our phone number. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. This is a very common question, so I just want to use it sort of to illustrate some things that are going on in the world of personal financial advice. Mary writes, my husband just retired. He will be 69 in March. I am still working. I will be 68 in April. We're trying to decide if we should pay someone to handle our retirement savings or how to handle it. Also, how do we find someone who will take our best interest into account and not just try to make money for themselves and leave us with nothing? We need help in trying to decide whether to do it ourselves or pay someone else to do it. Well, Mary, it's a great question. So, right now we're in this limbo land because the idea of putting an investor's best interest first is something that came to the Obama administration after the financial crisis. And there was this concept called fiduciary. Should we make anyone who's touching someone's financial life put that client's interest first or best interest first? And that best interest became this lightning rod, a divisive and really important issue. The Securities and Exchange Commission had sort of dawdled and dilly-dallied around the concept. They didn't want to force big brokerage firms to do this because the big brokerage firms had huge lobbying efforts, and they said, well, right now all of our financial advisors, even though they call themselves financial planners and lots of other things, they are held to something called suitability, meaning whatever advice they give must be suitable for you, but it doesn't have to be in your best interest. So how does that kind of in real life work? It means that your broker says to you, hey, Mary, you know what you should do with your retirement account? You should roll it over from your employer when you retire. I will manage it. I will charge you, some money to do it. But that's kind of the way it works. So that advice is suitable for you. No problem with it. But if that person were operating under the fiduciary standard, meaning they've got to put your best interest first, the person would have to say to you, I could do it. Here's the cost. You could leave it where it is, and the cost would be cheaper. It would be, just the cost of the funds. But if you want my advice, here's how much it would cost. And the other part of this is that insurance folks who would normally say, hey, why don't you put it into this IRA rollover account, and some of them might sell you a variable annuity, would have to say to you, I'm going to sell you a variable annuity. It costs you 3 times what it would cost you to just own mutual funds, but that way me and my firm can make a lot more money. They would have to disclose that to you. Okay. So the Obama administration's Department of Labor came out with a rule that said everyone in the retirement plan business would have to actually operate under the fiduciary standard. And, it seemed like it was going in and there was a lot of fighting, but it was going to go into effect. And then President Trump, new head of the Department of Labor, basically stopped the whole fiduciary movement in its tracks. It's now basically in limbo. And so the question you asked, which would have been one that was very easy to answer, which is, hey, anyone who touches a retirement account still has to do right by you. The answer is a little bit more difficult now because now the onus is on you. You have to ask whomever you are working with whether he or she is held to the fiduciary standard. And I know it's a drag because it's a strange industry where, you would never think, I'm going to the doctor and I'm going to ask the doctor, is this medical advice that you are dispensing in my best interest? I mean, you go to the doctor and you ask a lot of other questions. That's not one of them. So one way to do that sort of easily is just ask the person. You can also see if the person is a certified financial planner, a CPA, personal financial specialist, a PFS, someone who holds the CFA designation. These folks are held to the fiduciary standard when it comes to planning. Although, by the way, the CFP board is now thinking of tightening up its fiduciary standard, because right now the fiduciary standard for CFPs applies to the world of planning, but not to actual transactions all the time. They're trying to see how people would feel about that. But I would just ask the question. And you know what, Mark? Let's send Mary the 10 questions she should ask as she is interviewing advisors. One way that you can absolutely ensure that you are working with someone who is putting your best interest first is to ask them straight up, are you held to the fiduciary standard? Not just with your planning, but in every other area. And if they are not, then you may want to find someone else. You can find advisors near you through the CFP board, letsmakeaplan.org. You can go to NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. And I would say the FPA, but the FPA has mostly CFPs, but I think they still have about 20%, 20% of the folks at the FPA who are not. So just be sure to ask. You could try the FPA website as well, Financial Planning Association. It shouldn't be like this. Mark, it shouldn't be like this. It should be so much easier. It really is too hard for people. It's not fair to consumers. Don't get me started about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and how that's being gutted either. Thanks for that note, Mary. You are listening to Jill on Money. 855-411-JILL is our phone number. Our email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Have a finance question? There are many ways to reach the show. You can call anytime at 855-411-JILL, send an email to askjill@jillonmoney.com, or tweet a question on Twitter using the handle @JillOnMoney. Just use the hashtag AskJill.
You're back with Jill on Money. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. I am Jill Schlesinger from CBS News and from JillOnMoney.com. Maybe I should just say from JillOnMoney.com. Mark, maybe we should get you some business cards. Some Jill on Money business cards. Yeah, exactly. Hand them out. Just put the website on it, the new logo. The logo's not different. It's just a different color. You still like the logo, right? I like the logo. It's cool. Okay. By the way, I heard from our old friend and your former boss recently. We were just talking about him, and he's a big fan of the show. FYI. Let's see. Let's get to your emails. Here is a question that comes from Karen. Okay. I'm struggling to come up with an asset allocation that suits me. Most of what I read and hear is either for those in the accumulation phase or the retirement phase, and I'm sort of in between. That's interesting. A different kind of tweener. I'm a widow. I'm in my early 50s, so still many years away from being able to apply for Social Security or tap my IRA. I went back to work after my husband died, but I didn't get paid much. I love what I do. It's very rewarding, and it does get me and the kids health insurance, which is a huge plus. I got some life insurance. I currently get Social Security for my youngest, but that will be ending soon. The insurance gets me to retirement age, kids through college debt-free. I'm not sure what is the right asset mix for the IRA. If I manage my IRA right, it should be enough that I will never be a burden to my kids. But with my low income, I am not contributing anymore. We rode out 2008, 2009 without too much anxiety. His job was stable. We just kept putting money into the 401k, knowing we had a lot of years to go. It will be different next time because obviously the next time the market tumbles, I will not be contributing and probably not withdrawing yet either. While I'm not one to panic when the markets become volatile, I know that sequence of returns is a real risk for me now. Any advice on how to manage assets or books in for this phase. Okay. Karen, it's a funny thing. People talk about like retirement and accumulation, and what I would consider you to be is you're right. You're in between, but you really are in asset preservation and growth mode at the same time, meaning that you didn't tell me exactly how much money you have in retirement assets, but presumably you have enough that you said gets you through retirement probably. I think maybe what you need to be thinking about is a classic balanced portfolio. Because if you had a ton of money, then maybe what I would say is, you should absolutely put money, at risk in the stock market because you're investing for your kids. Or if you had a ton of money, I might say, you know what, you should take all that money you have and just keep it secure and keep it safe. But it sounds like you're in between there also. So you need to have some balance. You've got to have enough money in the stock market because you're investing for decades in the future and you need growth. And conversely, you can't have too much at risk because you have to preserve the asset you have. So a classic balanced portfolio is somewhere in this 40-60, 50-50, 60-40 range, meaning I don't know exactly. Again, it really depends on how much money you have. But if you said I have half of my money in really risky stuff, half of my money in less risky stuff. Maybe if you said I have a little bit more of a risk tolerance than that, 60 in risky, 40. But I wouldn't go beyond that. And the reason why balanced portfolios are sort of a great option for you is that it does give you the best of both worlds. Or maybe conversely, it gives you not the worst of both worlds, but it doesn't expose you to the worst of those two worlds of risk and no risk. Now, the other piece of this is, it sounds like you're going at it alone, and maybe for someone like you, getting some help, just getting a little guidance or paying for hourly advice might be something you should consider. And in that case, I don't know where you live, but perhaps check out the NAPFA website, N-A-P as in Peter, F as in Frank, A, NAPFA.org, because you might want to just pay someone a few $100 or $500 to just look at your current asset allocation and give you some guidance and also do some retirement planning for you. I think that is something that it might be well worth it for somebody in your situation. So the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, or NAPFA, the neat thing about NAPFA is that these are fee-only advisors. They only will give you advice. They will manage money, but they'll only charge you flat fee. And so I would go check that out. I think that's worth considering for you. Otherwise, it sounds like you're in good shape. So keep on keeping on, and make sure you run those retirement numbers if you haven't done so already. It sounds like you have, and keep them updated, and don't get sucked in either at the bottom or at the top. That's really the most important thing. You're listening to Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Give us a call, 855-411-JILL. And during the break, go to our website, JillOnMoney.com. You can read, listen, watch all the good stuff that we do. We'll be right back. You're back with Jill on Money. Before we close out the first hour of the program, want to remind you that our beautiful website, JillOnMoney.com, has got a bunch of stuff for you. You can listen to past shows if you've missed any part of this one or other shows that we're referring to. You can read our blog. You can watch the videos that Mark is producing and my most recent television hits. Are you migrating all that old stuff over to the website slowly but surely? Is that what's happening? Because I went and searched for an article that I'd written and I couldn't find it. I did find find it in my computer. Don't worry. I have copies of everything. Okay, so if you've got a financial question, give us a holler, 855-411-JILL. And you can always send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. That is what Nick did. He says, longtime listener, I'm now a college undergraduate senior who is debt-free. He's got a Roth IRA and he's looking at medical school. As he goes off to medical school, should I take out loans for the first time or should I try and pay my way through with a job and pay as you go? What would you recommend? Thank you. Mark, what do you want to tell Nick to do? Mark wants you to get the job. I want to tell you something. I sort of want to get you to get a job, but I also want to be clear that, you know what? It's freaking hard to be in medical school. Really, really hard. So that said, I mean, you can try it, but I don't want you to fall off your studies. And I think that if you find that it's just too much to juggle both, you just are going to have to suck it up and take a loan. Also, of course, try to get some money. Try to get a little bit of, see if there's some financial aid available, some grants, some scholarships. Hey, is Kelly Peeler deal with med schools at all? Just try this, Nick, just in case. We have a friend of the show, Kelly Peeler. She's the CEO of Next Gen Vest. Go check out Next Gen Vest to see if she can help you out, because I think it's more for undergraduate, but just in case, she may have some ideas. So nextgenvest.com. Check it out. Okay, you are listening to Jill on Money. Financial questions, we can help you with those. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com or give us a call, 855-411-JILL. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. It's hour number 2. I do sound a little froggy. You're right. I got a little something, a little low-grade something cooking for the last couple of weeks. You know what happened after I finally got my flu shot? Mark is snarling at me. I don't know. Everyone said get the flu shot, so I got it. What the heck? This is the last weekend of the Olympics. We have the closing ceremony on Sunday night. Have you been getting into it? I sort of started as not so much into it. Now I'm watching it every night, at least a little bit. I love some of the skiing. That half pipe stuff is nuts. Man, those people are so brave. I would never do anything like that. I usually think about the end of February as high tax planning time, which it is. But I am also noting that I'm missing some documents for myself, which drives me insane. I don't know why, but some of my investment stuff is a little bit late. I got a note from my custodian that said I wasn't going to get something till middle of March. That's putting a crimp in my planning. Mark's done. Did you file already? And he filed already. Are you owed, or are you owing a few bucks? He owes a little bit, but not a lot. What's the number? You can tell me. Oh, that's nothing. I think if you come within $3,000, you're in good shape. I think that absolutely. Anyway, oh gosh, the holiday shortened week is over. This starts to be a very rough time for people, because I don't think we have one stock market holiday until Good Friday. I think that's a pretty long stretch here. So, cuddle up to your loved one, or your doggy, or your cat, and get grit through it. You'll get through it. I know you will. It's tough. Okay, and also, by the way, let's start opening our minds a bit. We have a great guest this hour. His name is Rutger Bregman. His book is called Utopia for Realists. And it's just an interesting read. He did a TED Talk, and then we actually wanted to get him on the show. We booked him. And so here's an interview with Rutger Bregman about how we can get to utopia. Rutger, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I guess that I should also say you're a historian. I mean, you're sort of like a historian. You like almost a lay economist. It's all beautiful. It all comes together. So before we get started into your book, Utopia for Realists, I'd love to ask you one question. It's my icebreaker. I ask this at all the cocktail parties. What is the best financial decision you have made in your very young life so far?
It's probably very cliche, but I bought a house like 3 years ago when the housing market in the Netherlands was like completely down, and now it's going totally up again. So,
and where in the Netherlands are you? I had an amazing trip to Amsterdam. I just want to say that.
I live in Utrecht, and it's a little bit to the south of Amsterdam.
Fabulous. Yeah. Okay. So I want to begin the interview about your book, Utopia for Realists, by pointing out something that you write about in your introduction, which is basically life today, wherever you are, is probably better than it has been at any other time in history. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So many people get their worldview from watching the news nowadays, right? And the problem with the news is that it's all about exceptions. It's about things that go wrong mainly. So about corruption and violence and terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. So if you watch a lot of the news and you keep hearing about all these exceptions, at the end of the day, you know exactly how the world doesn't work. So what I try to do in the first chapter of my book is zoom out a little and look at, the long-term trends. And they're quite astonishing, actually. I think if historians will look back on our age, they'll wonder about all those people who are pessimistic about the future while they were actually living in the biggest age of progress that ever happened. For example, if you look at something like the decline of global poverty, 40-50% declines in the past 20, 30 years. Child mortality is going down by 50% since 1990. These are incredible big steps, but it's never in the news. There's never a headline that says child mortality declined today by 0.000000001%. Because it happens every single day. So yeah, that's where I start the book. Is that the problem today is not that we don't have it good. It's that we have no big new vision of where we want to go next.
I love this phrase that you have that, for most of the pace of history, we were poor, hungry, dirty, afraid, stupid, sick. Why is it that people are pushing back and, using, the obvious examples of, say, Brexit or the U.S. election? But why is it in these advanced democracies that we hear people saying, life stinks, I want to go back to a, quote, better time? What are they saying there?
That's a really good question. So I think just imagine that you're standing on top of a mountain and you made a very long journey to get there. When you're there, you can do two things. You can look ahead towards the next mountain you want to climb and be optimistic and excited about that. Or you can start looking down and be very afraid, because it's a long way down and you can fall very hard. And that's basically what we're doing right now. So because we have no new vision of where we want to go next, we have no new utopian idea. I really like to point out in my book is that every milestone of civilization, the end of slavery, democracy, equal rights for men and women, it was all utopian fantasy once. But we don't have that anymore. We don't have an idea of where we want to go, apart from, a little bit extra economic growth or the new iPhone, but that's about it.
So if you look back in the past, who frames that utopian vision? In other words, is it a politician that has done that in the past? Who usually frames that? I
think that politicians are often at the end of the line. So if everyone knows that a new idea might start to become reality, only then politicians will start to notice. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but they are often at the end of the line. So if I can just give the example of one of the ideas in my book, which is universal basic income, giving everyone free money to completely eradicate poverty. I started writing about that just 5 years ago, and almost no one knew what it even was back then in the Netherlands. And now there are 20 cities that want to experiment with it, and that really happened bottom up at the local level. People started talking about it, say, oh, can we do an experiment, et cetera, et cetera. And it's only now that politicians on the national level are getting interested. I think that's how it often works. So it starts with someone who is dismissed as crazy and realistic, irresponsible, and then people start taking notice, and what was once unrealistic becomes inevitable.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Rutger Bregman in just a second. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a holler. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com, and head over to our website, JillOnMoney.com, and you can subscribe to our newsletter. We'll be right back.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, she's all over the place. Go to JillOnMoney.com to find it all. Now back to the show with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back with Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we really would love to hear from you. A few ways to get in touch with us. You can go to our website, JillOnMoney.com. We have a contact button. Mark made that. So good. Also, Mark's newest invention, the Jill on Money newsletter. Check it out. We're going to hopefully get some information that you may have missed during the week, something that's going to help you take control of your financial life or better understand your financial life. So go to JillOnMoney.com, check it out, and always send us a note if you've got a financial question. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Now, we are in the midst of interviewing Rutger Bregman, who is really a smart dude. He is a historian. He is an author. His book that he has out now is called Utopia for Realists. And he's amazing. He's been nominated for this prestigious European Press Prize. He's been featured in lots of newspapers. The Guardian called him the Dutch wunderkind of new ideas. One of the ideas we're going to talk about in this segment is called universal basic income. And it's simply a model to try to basically say, we're going to provide citizens of a country or some municipality with some given sum of money, regardless of your income or your resources or your employment status. That's it. And it's an experiment in some respects in how we can try to reduce poverty. And how we can maybe prepare for a world where many people could be displaced by technology. And it sounds kind of wacky. I know, that's my reaction to it. Like, oh my God, we're just going to give everyone money? How's that going to work? And that sounds crazy. But Rutger Bregman says that there are some really interesting experiments that are going on right now. So here's more of our interview with Rutger Bregman. Okay, I want to focus in on universal basic income because I have been captivated by this concept over the last couple of years. And I didn't hear about it from you first, but I've been thinking a lot about it. And I would love it if you could explain that London experiment that we saw right around the financial crisis or right after, right? It was in 2009.
Yeah, this is a fascinating experiment. So what happened is it was an experiment in the city, the financial district, and they did it with 13 homeless men who had been living on the street for a long time, some of them for 40 years. And these were really regarded as hopeless cases. It was very expensive as well. You know, you should understand that someone living on the street may cost the community like $50,000 or $100,000 or pounds a year in terms of healthcare costs, you know, judicial costs, police costs, etc. So it was really time to try something new. And this organization just decided, well, let's just give them money, £3,000, and let's see what happens. We give them the money and they can decide for themselves what to do with it. We trust them to make their own decisions. But a year after the experiment, 7 out of 13 of the men had a roof above their head. 2 more had applied for housing. And they had saved money by a factor of about 7 or something like that. So the project cost about £50,000, and normally it would cost at least £400,000. These 13 homeless men. So even The Economist, not exactly a left-wing paper, even The Economist wrote the best way to spend money on the homeless might be just to give it to them.
Okay, so tell me about some other experiments, because it's 13 people, and then I know that people are going to be hearing this say, okay, well, there was these 13 guys in London, and they're going to dismiss it. They're going to poo-poo it. Anything bigger that you can point to around basic income and how it's played out in an experiment?
Yeah, there have actually been dozens of experiments, and much larger than this one around the globe. So the most fascinating experiment probably happened in the 70s in a small town called Dauphin in Canada. And what they did there is they basically eradicated poverty. So everyone who fell below the poverty line had their income immediately topped up unconditionally. And that experiment went on for 4 years. But then a new government was voted into power, and the new Canadian cabinet saw little point to the expensive experiment. And the researchers had to pack their files all away in about 2,000 boxes. It was only 25 years later that a Canadian professor found the records, did the analysis, and discovered that it had been a huge success. So the healthcare costs went down by 8.5%. Kids performed much better in school. Domestic violence incidents were down. Mental health complaints were down. And most importantly, people didn't work any less. That's often the biggest objection that people have. People will be lazy or something like that. But time and time again, when we actually experiment with basic income, that's not what happens. Most people want to do something with their lives. We just have to give them the means to get up.
It's sort of a fascinating thing, because I can hear the people listening and saying to themselves, but, we have to give people, why would we give people something for nothing? And it harkens back to all the welfare reform that we saw in the U.S., which was always linked to work. Like, you've got to do something to get work. And, you're lazy if you don't work, or if you're on welfare, you're lazy. It's a real judgment, right? So how can we shift out of that?
I think we got to do two things to change the conversation. And the first thing is to see this as an investment. So basic income, you can see it as venture capital for the people. It's an investment that pays for itself. We are paying through the nose right now in terms of higher healthcare spending, higher dropout rates, more crime, for poverty. Poverty is incredibly expensive. It's if you're not persuaded by the moral argument, then just look at the financial side of it. We are spending a lot of money on completely ineffective services, and we've got a lot of evidence that if you just get people out of poverty, it's better for everyone. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that I think we should completely change the conversation around work. There was one poll done a few years ago by Gallup, and they asked 142,000 people in more than 100 countries, do you even like your work? It turned out that only 30% of workers worldwide like their job. Now, there's another thing going on. This is what they found out in the UK, is that 37% of British workers have a job that doesn't even need to exist. That is a waste, and I don't hear many politicians talking about that.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the work ethic issues and the work week, because there's a chapter in your book called The 15-Hour Work Week, and I have always been dismayed at how many people I know who broadly are so psyched, pound their chest about how they hammered out an 80-hour week, or I worked 110 hours on this matter, or I've billed this client for that. First of all, when did working long and hard become better than having free time?
You'd be surprised that in the 1930s, one of the greatest economists who ever lived, John Maynard Keynes, predicted that we would be working just 15 hours a week in 2030. And he wasn't the only one. Many of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, economists, sociologists, you name it, all thought that we would be working less and less and less. Now, what went wrong? Since the 1980s, we've been working more and more and more. And I think there are basically two explanations. So the first one is consumerism. We keep on buying stuff we don't need to impress people we don't like. And the other one is, as I've been talking about, the rise of jobs that don't need to exist. And this is especially dominant in the service sector. And it's very important here to get the definition right. So a BS job is a job that the person who has that job, him or herself, says, well, if I stop working, it doesn't really matter. It's very easy to find out if your job matters. Just go on strike, see what happens. in the book, I use the example of a strike of garbage men in New York in 1968. And an average city survives that for about a week, and then, it's a complete disaster. The emergency state has to be declared. And then I just wondered, has it ever happened in all of world history that the bankers went on strike? And I found only one example, and this was in Ireland, 1970. And well, to be honest, nothing much happened.
What happens when the bankers went on strike and everyone's like, they were on strike?
Yeah, well, it lasted for 6 months. The economy just kept growing. And I think that we should also just really redefine work. I mean, if we would define work as doing something useful that we actually care about, then many people are not working at all.
Right.
Nowadays. Work, the way we define it right now, is just, it's basically earning money.
Okay, we'll get back to more of our interview with Rutger Bregman. I know your mind is blowing up right now, but okay, we'll give you a little break. And during the break, if you want, give us a holler. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. When we return, more of your questions and our interview with Rutger Bregman. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back with Jill on Money. And during the break, I hope that you were able to peruse our website because maybe you've missed a previous show that we have broadcast. I've been going back and listening to some of our old shows, old shows. I don't know how many are there, Mark. Do we have like the whole? We don't have like a whole archive there. We don't have that. But I've been listening to them because I'm writing a book right now, and I've been trying to remember all the great questions that you guys have been asking. And it is funny. We definitely get types of questions. We know kind of what you guys want to hear from us, but every so often, you just surprise me, and so that is why we are trying to get some new and different kinds of guests. So if you've got any sort of input on that and you've got an idea for a great guest, why don't you shoot us a note? Go to JillOnMoney.com. There's a contact link at the top of the page. And you can let us know, is there someone you've heard either on another radio show or a podcast you listen to, or someone you know personally, someone you've read, something that's cool like that? I'd love to hear from you. And since you're the listeners of the show, who better than you to know the cool guests that we could be having? So let us know, or just shoot us an email. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Okay, right now we are getting back to our interview with Rutger Bregman. The guy is mind-blowing. He's fantastic. And one of the things he starts talking about is something that we are hearing about so much right now, and that is the idea of open borders. Here's more of our interview with Rutger Bregman. Before I let you go, and I know you're a busy dude, talk a little bit about why the idea of open borders is or should be, you think should be part of the utopian vision.
Yeah, this is definitely the most radical idea in my book. So the basic idea of the book is that we need to think utopian again. That real progress always starts with someone who comes up with crazy ideas. And basic income is a pretty crazy idea. 15-hour work week is maybe even crazier. But open borders is definitely the most radical idea in the book. But it also starts with just one of the biggest injustices of our time, and that is the huge source of discrimination that we call borders. And we know from a mountain of economic evidence that immigration is still the most powerful instrument we've got against global poverty, and that so many of the arguments that you hear against it are simply not true. That they'll take our jobs, or that they'll drive wages down, or they'll be lazy, blah 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 blah. So I go over all those arguments in the book and try to show that we don't have to be as afraid.
I mean, is the fear on the immigration side tied to not having a bigger vision as well in your mind?
Definitely. Yeah. If you have a strong sense of identity, if you know who you are and where you want to go, you'll be open to others. You won't worry about, other cultural influence. You'll be interested in the rest of the world. But if you don't really know who you are, if you, feel insecure, then sure, you're going to be afraid. And I think that explains the xenophobia these days, is that if we don't really have a vision of where we want to go, if we don't have a strong sense of identity, well, sure, then there will be a lot of space for xenophobia. But I think that, for example, in Germany, Angela Merkel was a great example of how you can be patriotic and open to others at the same time. So what she said in German was, "Wir schaffen das." We can handle the refugee crisis because we're such a good country. We're rich, we're smart, we can do this. I think that's the way to do it.
You pitch this book and you say, okay, I'm going to write about Utopia for realists. And it's going to include this concept that's a little bit funky called universal basic income. I'm going to be talking about open borders, a 15-hour work week. What was the reaction that you got from your colleagues and editors? What was it, a hard sell?
What was really heartening to me is that especially young people, they're so fed up with all the old and boring political discussions about the left versus the right, blah, 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 blah. And what really excites me is that there are hundreds, thousands of people now around the globe that are saying, well, let's get up and do something. We've got an experiment that's with basic income that's starting in Finland, another big one in Canada. 5 years ago, none of this was happening.
Poke a hole in your thesis when you look at it. What is it, if you're going to be, throw your realist hat on? Where do you see the biggest pushback for you?
Well, look, my book is a really evidence-based book, but I can't pretend that we know enough already about basic income. So what I really like to see is more experiments in this direction.
In which country do you think there is going to be like the early adopter?
What's funny is that people from the US often say to me, this is some European welfare plan. It's probably going to happen there first. But actually, it was Richard Nixon who almost implemented a modest basic income at the beginning of the 70s in the US. So
stand down. Hold on a second. Richard Nixon, the earliest adopter of universal basic income?
Yeah. So at the end of the 60s, almost everyone in the US believed that some form of basic income was going to be implemented, from the left to the right. The economist Milton Friedman was in favor of it, but also a lot of economists on the left. And Richard Nixon just thought that, well, if everyone's into this, let's do it. Let me be the president who makes history. So his proposal for a basic income got through Congress twice. It was only when it hit the Senate floor that the Democrats basically killed it because they wanted a higher basic income. But I think it also shows you that if you really follow the news, then often you get the idea that there's not much possible. But if you zoom out a little bit, and that's my task as a historian, you'll be amazed at the things that can happen in such a short time.
Before we let you go, here's your bookend for your earlier question, which is, remember I said, what's your best financial decision? You said you bought a house. I know you're really young, but what was your worst financial decision?
Let me think about that. I went to university and I wanted to become a PhD for a while and wasted a lot of time on that idea.
Oh, well, it seems like to me it's actually played out pretty well for you. It sounds you're doing all right, right? Rutger Bregman, he is the author of Utopia for Realists. Get this book because you'll learn about universal basic income. You'll learn about the argument for a 15-hour work week and why open borders could maybe give us a new vision. It's just so well-researched, well-written. It's a lot of good storytelling in there. And so I can tell that you are not just a journalist, but you're also a wonderful author and a historian and have some really terrific vision. So Rutger Bregman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
If you missed any part of the interview, you can just hop onto the website, JillOnMoney.com, and listen to it right there. And if you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our phone number is 855-411-JILL. Our email address, askjill@JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back.
Have a finance question? There are many ways to reach the show. You can call anytime at 855-411-JILL, send an email to askjill@jillonmoney.com, or tweet a question on Twitter using the handle @JillOnMoney. Just use the hashtag AskJill.
You're back with Jill on Money. We are trying to clean up the inbox. So Mark has sent me a slew of your emails, so let's get right to it. If you have a financial question, we are happy to help you out. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com is the email address. 855-411-JILL is our phone number. Diane writes, with the new tax laws, just want to know, to pay off my credit cards, better to take a bank loan or borrow from a 401k. I'm 68 and I'm going to retire at the end of this year. I need more information, but here's the deal. If you're going to borrow from your 401k, then the money's going to have to be repaid, and I don't think that that's the greatest idea in the world. I don't know like maybe, I guess, take a bank loan. Can you do something else? Can you just accelerate the pay down of this credit card debt? The tax law did do one thing about loans against your 401k, but I don't know. I think that there's probably a better way. I need more information, so write us back. David writes, how many years before retiring should I begin to become less aggressive in my retirement savings? Maybe never. That's an interesting question, David, because the reason I say never is that, you retire. Maybe you're a balanced investor right now. Maybe you're a growth investor. You don't need all of your money at once. You're investing for decades in the future. I mean, even if you retire and you're 70 years old, that money's got to last for 20 years. So, I would say that if you're an aggressive growth investor and you want to kind of dial it back, I would say a few years, maybe 3 years before you're thinking about retirement, just a little bit, start then. But that's about it. Not more than that. Okay. Here is a book request. This is from Lori. I'm interested in learning more about the stock market. Can you recommend a book for beginners? How about, what do you think about this, Mark. What about Jack Otter's book? Should we do that? I think Jack Otter's book, worth it, not worth it. Jack is now the big-time editor over at Barron's. Try that one. I like that one. Think about that is a pretty good place to start. I'm just trying to think if there's another book that comes to mind. I mean, I think that the stuff that the Fool.com watches, that's to me, they're good. They're good to do some good stuff online. What else, Mark? Oh yes, Beth Kobliner. We love her. Get a Financial Life, and then How to Talk to Your Kids About Money. But Get a Financial Life is a good one. Who else? Liz Weston probably has a good book out there. Give me Liz Weston's book. She's a great writer. I worked with her at Money Watch, but now she's over at where is she? NerdWallet. She's great. Just look her up, Liz Weston. Try that. That should work for you. Is that enough? Go to our website. Just read there. Got a question about an estate attorney. And it's a longer story, but let me give you the bottom line. That remember, an estate attorney can charge your parents a bunch of money to actually create the estate documents. But once your parents die, there's other things that are happening, like the estate has to be settled. And I got an email from a guy who said, my parents paid a boatload of money for an estate attorney, and now I realize the estate has to pay a lot more money to actually settle the estate. How much money is a reasonable charge? I don't know whether we're getting ripped off or not. The estate is about $5 million. There's one house. Most of the money was in an IRA or 401k, meaning that probably it was a 401k to an IRA rollover. What's the story? You ready for the big part of this? The estate attorney says that he's going to charge the estate about $40,000 to $50,000. That's too much. I don't know. I don't know what exactly that estate attorney is doing for $40,000 or $50,000, but on a $5 million estate with not a lot of complications, there's no family business involved. We're retitling some assets here and there. Come on. Filing an estate tax return? I would shop for a new one. That's what I would do. You don't have to have the estate settled with the previous attorney. Also, you might not like the previous attorney. Maybe your parents did, or your mother did, or your father did, or whatever. Who cares? But, if you're the executor or the trustee, you can pretty much pick a new estate attorney. So I would look around and see if you get some names and go from there. 50 grand. Oh, come on. That's ridiculous. Redonkulous. All right. 50 grand. Settle an estate. These estate attorneys are trying to get their last licks in, I guess, before the estate tax law changes. All right. You're listening to Jill on Money. 855-411-JILL. That's our phone number. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. Hey, follow us on Twitter @JillOnMoney. Mark, how are we doing on Twitter followers? Slow but steady, he says. All right. Go to the website, jillonmoney.com. Read, listen, watch, all the good stuff that we're doing. We'll be right back. All right, you are back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, 855-411-JILL. Send an email. Ask Jill@jillonmoney.com. By the way, Mark's liking the emails better because he gets more detail and then he can follow up with you, and that's kind of fun. So maybe do the email more. It is tax season, and here is a great note from Tom, who writes, I'm a 71-year-old holdout who will continue doing my taxes by hand until I am forced to use tax software and or do them online. There's just something about the task, sometimes frustrating, that I feel better about this way. One year I actually bought TurboTax. I completed my return and then I did it all by hand to make sure the software was correct. I know, I need help. It is funny, by the way, error rate on when you use software goes down quite dramatically. But Tom, don't worry about it. It seems like you've got it under control. He writes, anyway, I completed my Fed and state returns over the weekend. I have them ready to take to the post office tomorrow. Then this morning I was reading the Chicago Tribune over coffee. I came across your column in the business section. Lo and behold, I find your reminder that the amount to deduct for medical and dental is 7.5%. I actually questioned this when I did my taxes because Schedule A stated to use 10%. Then after reading your piece, I went back, opened my packet, and confirmed that the form said 10%. I pondered what to do. After calling a buddy who offers his time doing taxes at a senior center, he confirmed it should be 7.5%. He explained the government actually printed and posted forms before the new tax laws passed. Some of the older forms were still out there and downloadable. If I hadn't read your column this morning, I would have sent it out in error. You saved me $100. Thank you. Keep up the good work, Tom. Tom, thank you so much for writing. I love that. I always try to find ways to help you save or make some money. Doesn't always work, but in essence, that is the goal. All right. Is this the end of the show, Mark? Oh, my God. It happened so fast. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you missed any part of the program, check it out, jillonmoney.com. You can also sign up for our new newsletter, jillonmoney.com. Thank you so much. And thanks to Rutger Bregman, a fantastic guest. We'll talk to you next week.